Hey, what's up guys? It's Epic by Grace. This is going to be the Bible study for today. We're going to be in Genesis 22 through 33. This is going to be a brief overview of Abraham and Isaac, but mostly Jacob. We're going to start out with Abraham. Abraham was probably the most faithful servant to God in my opinion, just simply because God asked him to basically sacrifice his son. I mean, blatantly. Just sacrifice your son. I want you to take your son up on a mountain, make an altar, a burnt offering, and sacrifice your son to me. That's what he said. So Abraham, being the humble servant and obedient servant that he is, said, "Yes, Lord, I will." So he does. And he took him up on the mountain, God Yireh. They named it after everything was happening and everything was done. And went to sacrifice him. And in mid-strike, to kill his son with a knife, the angel grabs his hand and says, "No, I see that you're willing to do this, and I see that you are fearlessly fearful of the Lord. You're willing to do whatever God asks you. You are an obedient servant to God." And so God blesses him. In Genesis 22, 16 through 18 basically says, "I'm going to number your descendants as many as the stars. And I'm going to bless your descendants, and your servants are going to serve me according to what is good and what is righteous." And we actually, if you follow the bloodline from Abraham to Jesus, you realize that bloodline is from Abraham. So Abraham was actually, his bloodline was blessed to save the world. Isaac, his son, it was not his first son. And back in the day, the first son was the birthright son. Got all the blessing from the father. But Abraham had been told by a prophet that God was going to give his wife, Sarah, a son, but she was past childbearing age at that point. And so he basically slept with his maidservant so that she could bear a son. And that was his son Ishmael. But as we see later throughout this story, he favors Isaac tremendously more and substantially more than Ishmael. And Ishmael actually is loved by Abraham, but is favored not as much as Isaac. And Isaac actually gets all of his blessing. Isaac later bears a son named Jacob, who is the twin brother to Esau. And Esau was the birthright son. He was the firstborn. Jacob was a manipulator. He tricked people, and he got what he wanted. He tricked his brother out of his birthright with a bowl of stew. He even tricked his father into blessing him by acting like Esau, his brother. Now this is where the story is interesting. Jacob's mother said, "Come here, let's dress you up in some fur, some wool, sheep's wool. So when he rubs your arm, he'll feel like it's Esau. Let's put your clothes on him so you'll smell like him, and I'll cook the meal like your father likes it, and you can serve it to him and get the blessing from your father." And so we see in Genesis 27, this is where he takes, basically tricks his father and steals Esau's blessing, and ends up actually fleeing because Esau wants to kill him. So at this point now he's running from Esau, and he travels to Laban. Laban is his uncle, and there he finds Rachel, Laban's daughter, and falls in love with her, wants to marry her. They want to marry each other. And Laban says, "You'll have to work 7 years for me first before you can earn Rachel." And he said, "Okay, I'll do it." So he works 7 years, and 7 years passes. Jacob says, "All right, I've worked for you 7 years, and I want to get married to Rachel now." And he says, "Okay." So they have the wedding ceremony, and blah 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 blah. And the wedding ceremony, there's a veil over the woman's face, so you can't see it. then you go into the bedchamber and you consummate the marriage. And that pretty much finalizes the marriage permanently. Till death do us part was taken very seriously at those times. So, what's interesting is Laban actually puts Leah, his older daughter, because she's supposed to be married off first, under that veil. And it's dark in that bedchamber, and he doesn't know that it's Leah, the oldest daughter. And so he lays with her and wakes up in the morning and finds out that it's Leah, and now he's very angry. He's been tricked. And he's like, why have you done this? She's like, but you laid with me. I'm married to you now. It's permanent. You can't get over it. So he goes to Laban, chews him out, said, man, you tricked me. You said I could marry your daughter Rachel, not Leah. And he said, well, you'll have to work 7 more years. And under great distress, agrees to it finally and says, okay, I'll work another 7 years. So he works 7 more years and marries Rachel. And so that's Genesis 29 through 31. Now, he has lots of problems dealing with Laban. He works hard for Laban. He grows Laban's wealth and power and status during his time within this 14 years of laboring for him. And Leah and Rachel end up bearing a lot of sons for Jacob. During this whole time, God is teaching him and training him and guiding his path. Every step Jacob takes during this 14 years is God ordained. On his travels to Laban before all this 14 years happened, God came to him in a dream and basically said, look, I'll be with you if you make me your Lord. And we talked about in the last video about God being the Lord of your life, making sure that He has control over everything, and you're stepping out of yourself and letting God take over. You know, and that's basically what God did for Jacob. And so during this 14 years, he has to deal with the manipulation of his father-in-law. He has to deal with the fact that Leah and Rachel are quibbling over who can bear children and who can't. There's just a lot of family drama going on in the situation, but Jacob stays true to what God is asking him to do, and God in turn blesses him. So at this point, God tells him and say, God, I want you to go back to your place of birth. And he says, but God, Esau's there. Esau will kill me. He said, I will make the way for you. You go. So he tells Rachel and Leah to pack their things up and go. So they travels back to his place of birth. And this is in Genesis 32 through 33. He wrestles with God. Literally wrestles with God. Now, this is interesting. They wrestle all night. And Jacob is just like, he's winning. And God says, let me go. He says, no, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And God says, all right, fine, you have my blessing. You'll no longer be called Jacob. You will be called Israel. And your bloodline will continue on. And you'll be blessed. Basically, a very similar blessing to what Abraham received as well. But now his descendants will be named after him, Israel. So he goes back. And on his travels, he wrestles with God, gets the blessing from God, gets a new name from God, Israel. And now, beyond this point, he's getting really nervous because he's getting close to where he used to live. And Esau comes out and meets him with 400 men. And at this point, Jacob's really scared. Jacob has made the decision to eat some crow, you know, to swallow his pride and go back and face Esau, you know, because he's willing to obey God. God has always blessed him. God has always done what he said he was to do, and so he always, you know, was an obedient servant and obeyed God and went back to where he came from. And now at this point, he's face to face with Esau, and he says, Esau, you know, I'm here. He actually gives him quite a bit of gifts to try and help soften the blow of his return, because he's worried Esau still wants to kill him. And so he actually gave Esau like 4 or 5 herds, like quite a bit of animals. We're talking about, at this point, 100, 150 different animals as a gift. And that was a large amount of wealth at that point. To try and soften the blow, soften his heart a little bit so that when he came back he was willing to accept him instead of kill him. Well, Jacob's humbleness was met with quite a bit of reward. You know, he humbled himself, he dropped his pride and obeyed God so that, you know, he wouldn't incur the wrath of God at that point. And so he knew God would bless him if he obeyed, and so he went. What he didn't expect is how much. He brought 400 men with him. Esau brought 400 men with him, but it wasn't because he wanted to kill everything. It's just he brought 400 men with him. It doesn't really describe why he brought 400 men, but he just showed up with 400 men. But he met Jacob with a hug and a kiss. And he said, "My brother, I've missed you. Come and bring your family in and come and we'll feast. You know, you're back. Our family's back together now." And so he's really surprised at this point by his brother's reaction, because he was expecting Esau was going to kill him. Jacob was expecting Esau to kill him, but now he's getting a hug and kiss because his brother actually missed him. And he said, "Well, I brought you these herds as gifts so that you can, you know, accept me." And he said, "No, keep your herds. I am blessed as it is. I don't need anything from you. Thank you, though, but keep it. I love you, and I don't need any gifts from you. You being here is gift enough." And so he was basically got his family back. So Genesis 22 through 33 is just basically God using this bloodline eventually to bring the coming of Christ, and ultimately blessing that bloodline to be the Savior bloodline of the earth. You know, from Abraham's loins comes Christ, and from Christ comes the salvation of the entire world. That's that. But there's some more meaning to this story, in the sense that these guys were obedient to Christ, or to God, I'm sorry. And these guys were willing to sometimes sacrifice everything, to swallow their pride, to humble themselves, to eat crow, to do whatever it was necessary that God asked them to do. You know, do whatever it takes to do what God asked them to do. They were genuinely obedient to God's will. And they allowed themselves to submit under God's will. And they allowed themselves to be obedient to God's will. And so, in Genesis 22, 16 through 18, we talked about how Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son. I mean, the son that he clearly favored over the rest of his children. He was willing to sacrifice this son and be obedient to God. And because God saw this willingness and this obedience, blessed him with innumerable descendants, blessed him with wealth and status, blessed him, gave him a healthy, rich life. I mean, the guy lived like 170 something years old. I mean, that's a healthy, long life, and it was full of happiness. And it wasn't all roses, it wasn't all great, but you know, when you submit yourself to God's will, and we talked about this last time on the last video, when you submit yourself to God and you submit yourself to His will, God immediately starts working in your life to move you towards a place of blessing. Now, it took 14 years for Jacob, but it doesn't always take that long. Sometimes God's able to move quickly and positively and pretty substantially. But sometimes that breaking period of our will, you have to break your will so God can come in and put His will in your life. You know, sometimes that learning process takes a little bit longer, you know, but you have to be patient that once you submit your life to God, submit your will to God, and say, God, I don't want to have anything to do with this situation. I put it in your hands. I want you to take control, and I want you to take out my will and insert yours. You know, you have to be patient at that point because God's timing is not our time. The last few months I've done nothing but try and fill myself with God right now. You know, I was this, and because of God I am now this. You know, I was a rough guy before, and now God has done a huge change in my heart, and I'm a completely different person because of it. It's literally night and day. It's just that drastic. And I can't give any credit to myself. It's all God, because everything that I had done had been based on my wisdom, based on my experience up until that point, and I was doing it all on my own. And so now that I've allowed myself to fall right in line with God's will, God's now working His hand and working His organization in my life so that it moves according to His path, according to His will for my life. And that's what I got from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is they were willing to be obedient and sometimes even sacrifice great things that meant to them to be obedient. And because of that, God was willing to bless their life and bring them out of the places that they were and elevate them to a higher status because of their obedience and because of their willingness to submit to God. Now, there are more things that apply to what you're supposed to do as a Christian, but I'm wanting to speak a life of grace into you guys. I'm wanting to speak a life of blessing into you guys, because a lot of churches now harp on the way you're supposed to be. You know, the way you're supposed to be like this. You're supposed to be a cookie cutter situation here where everybody looks alike, acts alike, is alike, you know, things like that. And God says, I'll take you as you are. I'll take you any way you can come. You know, I heard it on the radio and I thought this is the greatest analogy. If you worked for me and I was going to pay you with a $100 bill, but this $100 bill was missing a corner, it was ragged, looked muddy because I dropped it in the dirt the other day, and you know, it was just ragged, like it had been like through the beater. You know, it was just crazy looking. And I handed you that $100 bill, would you take it? Probably yeah, because it still has value. Money's money. You're going to take it regardless, because you can take the $100, regardless of the way it looks, and go spend it at Walmart, go spend it, you know, at a restaurant. They'll take it because it has value. It still is valued at $100. So that said, God takes us just like that too. We come through whatever is going on in our lives. You know, you might have been abused. You might deal with alcoholism, sexual addiction. You might deal with, you know, you might be young. You might be dealing with fights with your parents. You might be getting in trouble at school. You might be doing all kinds of craziness. You know, you could be on the end of the spectrum that says, man, I'm really messed up. I'm a drug addict, alcoholic, whatever. Or you could be just dealing with stress at school or stress at home, just stress in general. You know, it doesn't have to be anything crazy or anything light. Just God will take you wherever you are because He sees the value in who you are. And that's what I want to speak into you guys is this love that God has for you is just immense. You know, He wants to take you from where you are and put you in a place of blessing, put you in a place of life. Take you out of the dark, put you into light. Take you out of the pain, put you in a place of healing. Take you out of a place of have not and a place of have. You know, now you are under God's will and you have a life that's full and satisfying. You know, the Bible says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and all these things will be added unto you. That's a true statement. Truest if I've ever said it. Truest if I've ever heard it. Because as soon as you let God grab a hold of you, and this is based on my experience, what I've seen just in the last few months, but over my entire life too, as soon as you let God grab a hold of you, you seek Him, fill your life full of Him, He'll find you, He'll reach out to you, and wrap His arms around you and love you. And then at that point, He can start working on your heart. He can start working in you, making you a better person, making your life better, more satisfying and fulfilling. So, you know, that's it for you guys. Click the subscribe button right here, please. Click the ads all around me. Maybe there might be one right here somewhere. Make sure you hit the like button if you like it, favorite if you really like it, and make sure you're liking and subscribing. Check out my Facebook, my Twitter. There's links on my profile page here on YouTube. Check out my Instagram. I just started that up. It's EpicByGrace as well. Leave your comments, prayer requests, words, stuff, things, and such. Good, the bad, the ugly. Also, keep leaving those comments and those questions for the Unsung Hero interviews. Let me know what you want me to do with that show. And I'll see you guys later. Y'all have a good one. Be blessed. I love you. EpicByGrace. Make sure you subscribe and click the like button. Favorite if you really like it. And just all around like me. Make sure you do it. Do it now. Do it right now.